All right, well, speaking of Vancouver guys, this Trevor Baggs has been getting his 15 minutes of fame with all that's gone on from being kicked out of the press box in the Canucks game on Thursday. And, well, we kicked it around with Eric Francis, who's in Las Vegas, so now we've got somebody on the line from Vancouver. So I'll bring it up with you, Farhan Lalji. What are your thoughts on what happened to this reporter who got thrown out of the press box on Thursday?
Well, I think overall it was very much an overreaction. I think this is typical of Canucks PR and communication strategy, which generally is, their communication strategy is generally quite poor, right? I mean, this is the poster child of, 6 o'clock on a Friday news dump and, not having Thatcher Demko available for an entire offseason after signing an extension. Like, there's a lot of communication foibles in and around this team, and I think they overreacted. Now, in fairness, I do think there were some questions on how this story was presented. I don't think it was factually incorrect. But, I do think, they got a little sloppy and kind of took some liberties in terms of the framing, which they didn't need to necessarily do. But, I understand when you're a digital outlet and that becomes the model. Like, I know where that happens. But overall, Beggsy's a pretty respectable, reasonable reporter, right? Like, he's respected in our market, and even though he's a young guy and he's just getting started, people like his work. And so I think that the Canucks have turned this story into a very large, never-ending saga here, and they should only look at themselves, because the story itself was not about hockey, right? And it was not about a criminal offense in terms of what the owners of the Canucks were doing. So I don't think that this story would have got significant traction. The way the Canucks handled the situation has caused this story to get significant traction, and not just the removal of Beggs, but also the actual original story itself, right? So, again, could the Hive have been better? Yes. The Canucks then doubled down with their statement to the Globe and Mail, which was incredibly aggressive and also suggested that that story was factually incorrect, and I don't necessarily know that the crux of the story was factually incorrect. There's some shared blame here, but if I'm doling out the blame, I'm probably going 80% Canucks in terms of how this was handled. The story would have quietly gone away if they had not kicked him out of the press box in the first intermission, which sometimes makes you wonder whether or not this was intentional to make a statement.
I don't know if you've lived in Vancouver your whole life or how long you've been there, but I know you've been there a very long time. Yeah. Okay. And is this the most unpopular ownership group that the Canucks have had?
Oh, yeah. Like, this is Eugene Melnyk levels of unpopularity. There's no doubt, right? Like, I think the common thread amongst Canuck fans is sell the team. And at the same time, in fairness to Francesco Aquilini, he was also the owner when the Canucks got to the Stanley Cup final, and the best run of Canuck teams also happened at that time. I think that other than the year after the COVID season, I think the Canucks have spent, right? Like, this isn't a cheap owner. He has certainly committed to doing everything he can to make the team profitable, to make the team successful. So they've always operated at the cap except that 1 year, and it's, they've paid multiple coaches at various times. So it's not like they're not willing to invest. But there are some other things around this organization that haven't necessarily been very good beyond the on-ice product. And there's also been a real reluctance to rebuild, even though it was the obvious solution to everybody in the room for the last 12 years that this team needed a significant rebuild. So, in fairness to Francesco, he's and the family, they've done some positive things here. You can't overlook that, but the overall temperature or just the overall feeling amongst the fan base towards the owner is as negative as we've ever had. I mean, the original owners with the Griffiths family, actually they weren't the original, but the Griffiths family, Frank and Arthur who brought the team to GM Place and got the arena built and got the Olympics here to start with and got the basketball team here before he, had to sell, like, completely different vibe around that than what we're seeing right now.
I'm seeing stories online about some season ticket holders being given notice for a price increase of as much as 25%. And I know the one year that I got to be a glorified tape collector around the Detroit Lions, there would be people showing up at the ticket office and saying, we're so mad at the way you're running this into the ground, we're not going to come back next year. And people in the ticket office would say, we hear that from people all the time, and they're always back the next year. Are you hearing those stories of the 25% increases? And it seems a little out of line, or not out of line, but unusual, isn't it?
Well, look, there are stories of increase for sure. It's not every ticket. I haven't heard a number as high as 25% yet, so I can't confirm that number. But there have been ticket raises, and I know they're trying to add a game to the season ticket package and things like that. But yeah, it's wrong, right? Like the last 2 years of Canucks hockey have been gross. Like they've just been awful. The product has been terrible. This team, in all likelihood, will have the fewest home victories in the history of the franchise. Like fewer home victories than the Vancouver Grizzlies in their inaugural season. Right?
No.
This team is all shades of bad, and they're not just losing games. Like they're getting their tails kicked. There's the number of 3+ goal losses. Like it's not a good product. And they can blame injuries, but that really isn't the issue, right? Like the goaltender's hurt. There's a center hurt, Philip Hedl, who isn't, a franchise-changing type of player. It's a bad team. And the reality is that after the last 2 seasons, there should not have been ticket increases. When you look at other teams, they even tell you it's their team policy that after you miss the playoffs, we're not raising tickets. So, it's kind of a read-the-room situation. I don't think it helps them optically to even raise 25% of the tickets, right? Like it just isn't. It's not a good look given how bad the team has been and how particularly bad at home they've been.
Doesn't feel like they're picking their spots with that. Wow, that Vancouver Grizzly reference just blew me away, not just because I'm wearing my Big Country jersey today, but I remember how bad those Grizzlies teams were, and I'm struggling to find any kind of correlation to that. I wanted to ask you about something that I chatted a bit with Glenn Suter about yesterday, and I always think of different ways to get people excited about the Canadian Football League, particularly in the big 3 markets like Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, because that's where the problems are. By and large. And I think a lot about that 1991 season where Doug Flutie didn't just break the pro football passing record, he shattered it with over 6,600 yards passing. I know 5 of those games that year went to overtime. That was when they had the old overtime format and you'd play the whole 10 minutes. So George Cortez has reminded me that Doug kind of padded his stats a little bit that year. He played almost 19 games when you really think about it. Still, nonetheless, the CFL was electric on the West Coast that year. That is one of not only the greatest achievements in pro football history, but I would opine in professional sports history. And there was a game when they played the Toronto Argonauts where Rocket Ismail came in and John Candy was there and Bruce McNall and Murray Pezum. And the cameras were as much on them in the press box as they were on what was happening down on the field. And I've always thought that the BC Lions should celebrate Doug's achievement somehow, and it just doesn't seem like they ever have. And I've talked to people close to the Lions who say they're not thinking about nostalgia because they're looking to a younger audience, and that's fair. I totally get that. I think that's the right strategy. But has that ever hit you? Like, have you ever thought that the BC Lions should maybe do a little more to celebrate that incredible achievement and maybe invite all 50,000 people, those who are still with us, to come back for another game to celebrate that?
Well, I mean, it might be a little extreme, right? I don't know how you get a hold of them. I don't know how you verify that they were there. I don't know how you do any of that, right? And, I would imagine a lot of people that were there are in their 70s and 80s now, right? So it's that part might be a stretch, but yeah, look, I think every opportunity you get to take advantage of your history and celebrate it, I think is something that you should do. Doug Flutie's a name that resonates, and I don't know that I've seen him around a lot of Lions activity over the last 2 decades since he left here, but so I would do that. Do I think that's a game changer? No, because I do agree. They're trying to get a younger audience. It's not a nostalgic crowd. It's the way it is, and it's just not what they're trying to get back to. But again, a guy like that kind of transcends a lot of different ages. I think people recognize the name, and whenever you can associate yourself with him, because, in Calgary, there's a strong association with Doug Flutie, and then, as good a season as he had, he never won a Grey Cup with BC. He did wind up doing that with Toronto, right? So I know that they've made their moments where they've been able to celebrate him. They've done that a little bit, right? But Toronto, to your point, would have the same kind of issues in terms of the market here and how much they want to get back into the past and things like that. I don't know that that's necessarily the way to sell the product here. Like when you bring Darian Durant back for a game in Regina, it's a thing. I don't know how much of a thing it is here, and I'm not saying you shouldn't attempt it. I just don't know that it's something that's going to significantly move the fan base.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. I think if nothing else, Doug and others should want to celebrate that achievement. I just feel like it's another example of the CFL has something, like the biggest difference between the CFL and the UFL and all that is the fact that we actually have a history up here, which matters in football.
Absolutely.
It's like Dave Naylor said, you have a history and you have fans, and players kind of want to see some of that. And sometimes I just think it's a bit of a lost opportunity because I started watching Canadian football right in that era, and I don't know that I would have become a CFL fan if it didn't hit me right at that time, because the games were amazing with the points that were put up and the style of play by quarterbacks, etc. Quickly before we let you go,
well, 66,000 yards at any level of play is ridiculous, right? So I don't want to minimize the accomplishment at all, because I think in terms of a single season, we've never seen anything like that.
And we'll probably never see it again unless the NFL goes to like a 22-game schedule or something like that. But I just quickly.
Possible.
But before I let you go, just quickly, I wanted to ask you. You'd mentioned it's not a nostalgic crowd, and I've heard that the Lions front office isn't big into the nostalgia. They've been running it since the pandemic, and I think they're doing a great job. Amar Doman might be the best owner in the Canadian Football League. Are you seeing evidence that they are making inroads with the younger crowd?
Yeah, I think so. Having spoken to people at the president's level, I mean, season tickets are ahead of schedule, or ahead of pace, I should say. You see more Lions wear out there. You see more Lions in the community, right? I mean, Amar does a great job of getting involved with amateur flag football and running camps and the things that they've done. And I think the Lions have really made an effort to go out there and put themselves in the community, but it just hasn't necessarily been branded as such, right? Well, it's been quietly done, and now I think it's a little louder. So you're seeing crowds increase in each of the last three seasons, I should say. The first year you don't really overplay that because it's coming out of the pandemic. You knew there was going to be an uptick, but now you do see it on the regular, and it's not just the one. Like a lot of the cynics will say, well, they get 50,000 for the concert on the opening night, but then they don't do that the rest of the way. I do think things are improving. The rest of the season is 2,000 more per game last year than it was 2 years ago, right? So I think that's a meaningful number, and I think they'll continue to grow off that this year.
Yeah, and sometimes it's those foundational things that make a bigger difference that we don't always see, at least right off the hop, and it takes a while for that to build up. Hey, listen, no Friday show, so we're going to give you the rest of the week off. Thanks for doing this, Farhan.
You're a good man. Where's Barney today? He's in the Cayman Islands or something, right?
Vegas, of course.
Vegas. All right. Close enough.